Some mornings I wake to a heaviness that clings like damp fog settling into my bones before my eyes even open. It's a familiar weight, one I've carried since I was 12, when the world first seemed too vast, too sharp, too indifferent. I remember lying in bed, the ceiling a blank canvas for my spiraling thoughts, each one a brushstroke of despair. Depression was my shadow trailing me through school hallways, therapy sessions, and countless prescriptions that promised relief, but delivered only numbness. I cut my skin to feel something else, anything else, and whispered to myself in the dark about endings. For 14 years, I lived in that fog believing it was my forever. But 5 years ago, I stumbled upon a spark of philosophy that felt like a hand reaching through the mist. Stoicism. The words of ancient thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus spoke to me not as distant relics, but as living truths. I sat at my kitchen table, a tattered library book open before me, its pages yellowed, but its ideas incandescent. You have power over your mind, not outside events, Marcus wrote. I read it again, my coffee growing cold, and felt something shift. Could I train my mind to rise above this? Could I, after all these years, find a way out? That question became my lifeline. I was no stranger to effort therapy, counseling, medications, but this was different. Stoicism wasn't a pill or a platitude. It was a call to action, a demand to take responsibility for my own thoughts. I began to see my depression not as a fate, but as a challenge, one I could meet with reason. I started small, scribbling quotes on sticky notes and taping them to my mirror. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason, Epictetus warned. I read them each morning, my reflection blurry with sleep, but my resolve sharpening. I dove into Stoicism like a man parched, gulping down its principles alongside psychology texts. To understand my mind's mechanics, I learned that my suffering wasn't just chemical, it was a story I told myself, a narrative I could rewrite. The ancients taught me to question my assumptions, to see pain as a signal, not a sentence. I began to journal my pen, scratching late into the night, dissecting moments when despair crept in. What triggered it? A harsh word, a memory I traced each feeling to its root, not to dwell, but to understand. Knowledge I found was a lantern in the dark. This awakening wasn't instant. There were days I faltered when the fog rolled back and whispered old lies. But I kept at it, driven by a quiet fire. I meditated each morning, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, the hum of the city outside my window. I focused on my breath, letting thoughts pass like clouds, not clinging to them. I practiced negative visualization, imagining worst-case scenarios, not to scare myself, but to realize I could endure them. If I lost my job, my health, my loved ones, I'd still have my reason, my ability to choose my response. That was my power, and no one could take it. I also began to see the world differently. Walking through the park, I noticed the way leaves shivered in the breeze, each one a fleeting miracle. I'd spent years blind to this, my eyes turned inward, clouded by self-pity. Stoicism taught me to look outward, to find beauty in the ordinary, to anchor myself in the present. I started smiling at strangers, not because I felt joyful, but because I chose to act as if I did. And slowly, the act became real. This part of my journey taught me a principle I carry. Still, the mind is trainable, a muscle that strengthens with use. I didn't need to wait for happiness to find me. I could build it thought by thought. For anyone listening, feeling that same weight I did, I offer this: start where you are. Pick one idea. Maybe it's Marcus's reminder that your mind is your domain, and hold it close. Write it down, repeat it, leave it for a day. Notice how your thoughts shift when you claim that power. It's not a cure, not yet, but it's a step. and one step I learned can lead you out of the fog. My path wasn't linear, and the fog still lingered at times, but I'd found a compass in Stoicism, a way to navigate when the world felt too heavy. I was no longer a victim of my mind, I was its student, its master. And as I walked forward, I began to see that this philosophy wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, about building a life of purpose and peace. As I stood at the edge of my new path, Stoicism's spark glowing within me, I began to grasp a truth that felt both liberating and daunting. My emotions weren't chained to the world's chaos, but to my own thoughts. The realization hit me one evening, sitting on my apartment's worn couch, the city's hum seeping through the window. I'd spent the day unraveling my boss's sharp critique at work, a friend's cancelled plans, the news blaring, and endless crises. My chest tightened, the familiar fog of despair creeping in. But then I paused, Epictetus' words echoing. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. Was I letting these events control me, or was I choosing to let them? I leaned back, closing my eyes, and pictured my mind as a fortress. The world outside its noise, its judgments, its unpredictability was a storm I couldn't silence. But within these walls, I was sovereign. I could decide which thoughts to let and which to bar at the gate. For years, I'd believed my depression was a reaction to life's blows, an inevitable tide pulling me under. Stoicism showed me otherwise. It wasn't the critique, the cancellation, or the news that hurt me, it was the story I wove around them. This means I'm worthless, I'd tell myself, or nothing will ever change. Those were my judgments, not facts. I began to experiment, treating each moment of distress as a puzzle. The next morning, I spilled coffee on my shirt before a meeting. My pulse quickened old habits, urging me to spiral. I'm a mess, I'll screw this up. Instead, I breathed deeply, the air cool in my lungs, and asked, what can I control here? Not the spill, not my boss's reaction, but my response. I changed my shirt, walked into the meeting, and focused on my words, not my fears. The day didn't collapse. The fortress held. This practice became my anchor. I carried a small notebook, jotting down moments when I felt the fog rise. Beside each, I wrote what I could control: my effort, my perspective, my next step. A missed deadline wasn't my ruin. It was a chance to apologize and improve. A sleepless night wasn't a failure. It was a moment to rest my body even if my mind raced. I drew on Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me and my own way of thinking." His words were a mirror showing me that my suffering was often self-inflicted, born of clinging to what I couldn't govern. I also turned to psychology, blending Stoic wisdom with cognitive tools. I learned about cognitive distortions, those warped lenses, like all or nothing thinking, that had long skewed my view. When I felt rejected, I'd assume no one cares. Stoicism taught me to challenge that. I'd sit at my desk, pen in hand, and write, "Is this true? Can I control others' feelings? No. Can I control my actions? My kindness? Yes." This dialogue with myself, raw and honest, was like clearing cobwebs from a long sealed room. The world didn't stop throwing storms. Bills piled up, relationships frayed, and my body sometimes betrayed me with fatigue. But I began to see these as external, not me. I pictured myself as a sailor, my ship rocked by waves but steered by my hand. I couldn't calm the sea, but I could adjust the sails, my thoughts, my choices. One night, after a heated argument with a loved one, I walked through the park, the air sharp with autumn's bite. Instead of replaying the fight, I focused on the crunch of leaves underfoot, the rhythm of my breath. I asked, what can I do now? I could listen, apologize, or give space. I chose the latter, and the knot in my chest loosened. For anyone feeling overwhelmed, I share this. You are not the world's puppet. Try this today when anger or sadness rises. Pause. Feel the ground beneath you, the air in your lungs. Ask, what's in my control? Maybe it's just your next word, your next step. Act there and nowhere else. It's not easy, but it's freedom. I learned this slowly, messily, but each choice strengthened the fortress. This shift didn't erase pain, but it gave me power over it. I was no longer a leaf in the wind, but a man learning to stand firm. The fog still loomed at times, but I had a tool, a way to navigate, to choose reason over ruin. And with each choice, I built a life not defined by what happened to me, but by how I responded. I stand at the edge of memory, peering into the darkest corners of my past, where shadows of despair once held me captive. For years, I lived with thoughts of ending my life, whispers that began at 12 and grew louder through my teens and 20s. I remember nights sitting on my bedroom floor, the carpet rough against my palms, a blade in my hand, tracing lines on my skin to quiet the chaos within. Those moments felt like an abyss, vast and inescapable, where every thought screamed, "You are not enough." But Stoicism taught me to face that abyss, not with fear, but with courage, to see pain as a teacher, not a tyrant. I began this work 5 years ago, sitting at my desk, a journal open before me, its pages a battlefield for truth. I wrote about those nights not to dwell, but to understand. Why did I feel so broken? What drove me to the edge? Stoicism, with its unflinching clarity, urged me to confront these questions. I drew on Epictetus, who said, "Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason." My suicidal thoughts, I realized, weren't facts. They were lapses, distortions I could challenge with reason. I started by naming the abyss. Depression had convinced me I was worthless, a burden doomed to fail. I'd lie awake, the clock ticking past midnight, imagining how the world would be better without me. But I began to ask, is this true? I sat in my living room, the morning light slanting through the blinds, and wrote, "What evidence proves I'm worthless?" I listed my actions, helping a friend, finishing a project, even getting out of bed. Small but real. The abyss shrank as I shone reason's light into it. This wasn't easy. Some days the fog returned, heavy and suffocating. I'd feel the old pull, the urge to give in. One evening, after a string of rejections, job applications, a strained relationship, I stood in my bathroom staring at my reflection, the weight of it all pressing down. But I remembered Marcus Aurelius today. I escaped anxiety or no, I discarded it, because it was within me and my own way of thinking. I stepped back, breathed, and chose to act. I called a friend not to confess my darkness, but to connect, to remind myself I wasn't alone. The abyss didn't vanish, but I learned to walk its edge without falling. Stoicism taught me to reframe pain as a signal, not a sentence. I began to see my suffering as a call to grow, like a muscle aching after a heavy lift. I practiced amor fati, love of fate, embracing even the hardest moments as part of my journey. One afternoon, walking through the city, the air thick with summer heat, I passed a street musician playing a mournful tune. It stirred memories of my darkest days, but instead of turning away, I stopped, listened, and let the sadness wash over me. This is mine to bear, I thought, and I can bear it. I tipped the musician and walked on lighter. I also leaned on Stoic exercises to ground myself. Negative visualization became a ritual. Each morning I'd sit by my window, coffee in hand, and imagine losing what I valued: my health, my home, my purpose. Not to despair, but to prepare. If the abyss returned, I'd still have my reason, my choice to keep going. This practice stripped fear from the unknown, making the present vivid. I noticed the warmth of the mug, the chirp of sparrows outside details I'd once ignored in my haze. For anyone staring into their own abyss, I offer this: don't run from the pain. Sit with it, name it, question it. Try writing one thought that haunts you, maybe I'm a failure, and ask, what's the evidence? List 3 things you've done, however small, that prove otherwise. It's not a fix, but a start. Pain is a teacher and reason is your guide. You don't have to conquer the abyss in a day. Just take one step toward the light. My past still whispers sometimes, especially on quiet nights when the world feels heavy. But I'm no longer its prisoner. I've learned to see those thoughts as passing clouds, not my sky. Stoicism gave me the tools to face the abyss, to learn from it, to grow. I carry its lessons forward, not as a shield against pain, but as a compass through it, guiding me toward a life shaped by courage and clarity. I wake each morning to the soft gray light filtering through my curtains, the world still quiet, and I feel the pull of old habits, the urge to stay in bed, to let the fog of depression creep back. But I've learned that freedom from despair isn't a gift. It's a structure built brick by brick through daily discipline. 5 years ago, when Stoicism first lit my path, I realized that transforming my mind required more than insight. It demanded action, consistent and deliberate. I began crafting a routine not as a cage, but as a scaffold. Each small choice a step toward a life I could command. I started simply sitting at my kitchen table, the wood cool under my fingertips, a notebook open before me. I wrote down 3 tasks for the day. Meditate for 10 minutes. Read a page of Marcus Aurelius' journal. One thought. Small but intentional. You have power over your mind, not outside events, Marcus wrote, and I took it as a challenge to master the hours ahead. I set my phone aside, the screen's glow, a siren call to distraction, and focused. That first morning I sat cross-legged on the floor, my breath uneven, thoughts darting like startled birds. But I stayed counting each inhale, building a moment of calm. Discipline, I found, was less about willpower than habit. I leaned on Stoicism's call to focus on what's in my control, my effort, my consistency. Each evening I reviewed my day of practice, inspired by Seneca's reflections. In my journal, I'd write, what did I do well? Where did I falter? One night after snapping at a coworker, I wrote, I let irritation rule me. The next day I practiced pausing before speaking, picturing my words as stones I could choose to throw or set down. Slowly, the stones stayed in my hand. I also built physical rituals to ground my mind. I walked every afternoon, the city's pulse around me, honking cars, chattering pedestrians fading. As I focused on my steps, the rhythm of my shoes on pavement became a meditation, each stride a reminder I choose this moment. I ate simple meals, not out of deprivation, but to honor my body as a tool for reason. A bowl of oats, a sliced apple, the crunch of each bite anchoring me to the present. These acts weren't grand, but they were mine, and they mattered. Stoicism taught me that discipline isn't about perfection, but persistence. There were days I failed snoozing my alarm, skipping my journal, letting all the despair creep in. One rainy morning, I sat staring out the window, the glass streaked with drops, feeling the weight of a bad week. But I remembered Epictetus. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. I didn't need to fix everything at once. I opened my book, read one line, and wrote one sentence. That was enough to begin again. I drew on psychology too, learning how habits form through cues and rewards. My cue was the morning light, my reward, the quiet pride of a day well begun. I taped the quote to my fridge. Concern should drive us into action and not into a depression, Pythagoras said. It reminded me that discipline was action, a way to channel worry into purpose. When anxiety stirred about work relationships, the future, I turned to my routine. Meditate, read, write. These were my anchors steadying me against the storm. For anyone seeking to build their own scaffold, I offer this start with one act, however small. Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence each morning, feeling your breath, noticing the world without judgment. Or write one sentence about what you're grateful for: the warmth of your coffee, the smile of a stranger. Do it today then, tomorrow. If you miss a day, don't curse yourself. Just begin again. Discipline isn't about being flawless. It's about showing up, choosing reason over chaos, one moment at a time. My routine grew stronger, a rhythm that carried me through harder days. I still felt the fog at times, but it no longer ruled me. I'd built a framework not to escape pain, but to live through it with purpose. Each morning, as I sat with my notebook, the world outside waking, I felt a quiet power not in controlling life, but in shaping my response to it. Discipline was my bridge leading me from despair to clarity, and I walked it step by steady step. I walk through my days now with a clearer lens, but I remember when every moment was clouded by judgments I mistook for truth. 5 years ago, as Stoicism began reshaping my mind, I saw how my depression fed on distorted thoughts, lies I told myself about who I was and what the world meant. A missed call became, they don't care, a small mistake at work, I'm a failure. These weren't realities, but stories heavy as iron chaining me to despair. Stoicism, through Epictetus's sharp wisdom, taught me to challenge these false judgments, to sift truth from fiction and reclaim my mind's freedom. I sat one evening on my balcony, the city's lights flickering below a notebook in my lap. Epictetus's words rang clear: very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. I'd been upset all day, replaying a colleague's offhand comment, "You're too intense." My mind spun it into a verdict: I'm unlikable. I push people away. But I paused, pen hovering, and asked, is this true? What's in my control? Not their words, not their thoughts, but my interpretation. I wrote, they spoke from their perspective. I can choose to listen or let it pass. The weight lifted not fully, but enough. This practice became my sword against false judgments. I carried it into every moment of doubt. One morning, rushing to a meeting, I tripped on the sidewalk papers, scattering in the wind. My old self would have spiraled. I'm a mess. Everyone's judging me. Instead, I knelt, gathered my things, and thought, this is just a moment. It doesn't define me. I stood, brushed off my coat, and walked on. Stoicism showed me that events are neutral. My judgments give them power. I could choose to see a stumble as shame or as a chance to keep moving. I leaned on Stoic exercises to sharpen this skill. Each night I reviewed my day, not to dwell, but to dissect. I'd sit at my desk, the lamp casting a warm glow, and write, what upset me today? Why? Often it was a judgment I'd accepted without question. A friend's silence wasn't rejection, it was their busy life. A tight deadline wasn't a trap, it was a task I could break down. I drew on Marcus Aurelius's clarity today. I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me and my own way of thinking. His words reminded me that my mind, not the world, held the key. Psychology bolstered this work. I studied cognitive distortions, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, and saw how they'd fueled my depression. Stoicism gave me the will to fight them. Psychology, the map. When I felt overwhelmed, I'd pause, breathe, and challenge the thought. One afternoon, stuck in traffic, my chest tightened. I'm always late. I'll lose everything. I close my eyes, the car's hum steadying me, and asked, "What's the worst that happens? I'm late." I apologize. I move on. The fear dissolved not because the traffic cleared, but because I refused to let a false story rule me. This wasn't instant. Some days judgments slipped through sharp as thorns. After a heated family argument, I lay awake, thinking I've ruined everything. The fog loomed familiar and heavy. But I rose, lit a candle, its flicker a small defiance, and wrote, I spoke harshly, but I can apologize. I can't control their feelings, only my actions. By morning, I'd cold spoken softly and rebuilt a bridge. The abyss didn't claim me because I chose reason over ruin. For anyone tangled in their own judgments, I share this: when a thought stinks, hold it up to the light. Ask, is this true? Can I control it? Try it now, pick one worry, maybe I'm not good enough, and write down 3 things you've done well, no matter how small. A kind word, a finished task, a moment of courage. These are truths. Let the lies fall away. It's hard, but it's power, and it grows with practice. I still stumble, but I no longer believe every thought that crosses my mind. The world throws its chaos, criticism, setbacks, silence, but I've learned to meet it with a question, not a verdict. This discipline, this discarding of false judgments, has been my shield, turning storms into breezes, despair into possibility. I carry it forward, a quiet strength, knowing my mind is mine to shape. I sit at my desk, the morning sun casting long shadows across the room, and feel the stir of worry bills, unpaid, a friend's distant silence, the world's endless clamor. For years, these concerns would pull me under each one a stone, sinking me into depression's depths. But Stoicism, like a steady hand, showed me a different path. Worry doesn't have to paralyze, it can propel. Pythagoras' words became my guide. Concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. I learned to channel restless thoughts into purposeful steps, transforming fear into fuel for a life of meaning. This shift began as I deepened my Stoic practice, my notebook, now a map of small victories. I'd spent 14 years letting concern fester about my worth, my future, my pain. It was a habit, one that fed the fog until I could barely see. But 5 years ago, I started asking, what can I do with this feeling? One evening, after reading about a local crisis, families displaced by a fire, I felt the old weight, the helplessness. Instead of spiraling, I paused Epictetus's clarity in mind. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in action. I searched online, found a donation drive, and gave what I could: a few dollars, a bag of clothes. It wasn't much, but it was action, and it steadied me. I began applying this everywhere. At work, a looming project deadline sparked anxiety in my mind, whispering, "Oh, you'll fail." I sat with the fear, the chair creaking under me, and wrote a plan: break the task into steps, tackle one today. I typed the first paragraph, and then another, and the keyboard's click a rhythm of progress. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled. Stoicism taught me that action, however small, is a choice within my control. I couldn't fix the world or silence doubt, but I could move forward one deliberate act at a time. This principle reshaped my daily life. I walked through the park, the air crisp with spring, and noticed a litter scattered by the path. Concern stirred not just for the mess, but for my city, my place in it. Instead of brooding, I grabbed a bag, picked up cans and wrappers, the grass soft under my knees. A passerby smiled, and I nodded back, feeling not pride, but purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety," or no, I discarded it, because it was within me and my own way of thinking. Action, I found, was a way to discard worry, to make concern a spark rather than a shadow. I wove this into my routine, blending Stoic wisdom with practical steps. Each morning, I meditated, picturing a challenge, maybe a tough conversation or a personal goal. I'd ask, what's one action I can take? When a friend grew distant, I didn't stew in rejection. I sent a message simple and kind, thinking of you. Here, if you need me. Sometimes they replied, sometimes not, but I'd acted, and that was enough. Psychology reinforced this, showing how action breaks the cycle of rumination. I learned that doing even imperfectly shifts the mind from despair to possibility. There were days I faltered. One night, overwhelmed by news of global strife, I sat on my couch, the TV's glow harsh, feeling small and powerless. The fog crept in, whispering, nothing matters. But I remembered Pythagoras and turned off the screen. I wrote a letter to my senator about a cause I cared for, my pen scratching in the quiet. It might not change the world, but it changed me. Action, I realized, isn't about scale. It's about refusing to let concern curdle into inaction. For anyone gripped by worry, I offer this: pick one thing troubling you today. Maybe it's a messy home, a strained relationship, a fear of failure. Ask, what's one small action I can take? Let's clean one corner, send one text, write one sentence. Do it now, not perfectly but with intent. Feel the shift, however slight. Action is your power, a way to meet concern with courage. It's not a cure, but a step and steps built paths. I still feel concern about the world, about my place in it, but I no longer let it drown me. Each action, from a kind word to a finished task, is a brick in the life I'm building. Stoicism gave me this tool to see worry as a signal, not a sentence, and to answer it with purpose. I carry this forward, and knowing that every step, however small, is a victory over despair, a testament to the power of reason in motion. I stand in the quiet of my apartment, the world outside buzzing with its relentless pace, and feel the echoes of setbacks that once would have broken me. A missed opportunity, a harsh word, a day when the fog of depression crept back, these were enough to unravel me, to send me spiraling into despair. But Stoicism has taught me to see life as a training ground, each challenge a chance to forge resilience. I've learned to bend without breaking, to face storms with a steady heart. 5 years ago, as I wove Stoicism into my life, I began to see setbacks not as failures, but as tests. One winter morning, I woke to an email. A job I'd poured my heart into had gone to someone else. My chest tightened, the old voice whispering, "You're not enough." I sat at my kitchen table, the air cold against my skin, and let the pain settle. Then I turned to Epictetus. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. I couldn't control the decision, but I could control my response. I wrote a thank you note to the employer, asked for feedback, and started searching for new opportunities. The sting lingered, but I moved forward. This resilience grew through practice, like a muscle worked daily. I leaned on Stoic exercises, especially premeditatio malorum, preparing for the worst. Each evening I'd sit by my window, the city's lights a distant hum, and imagine challenges: a health scare, a financial hit, a loved one's loss. I'd ask, how would I respond, not with panic, but with reason, seeking help, cutting expenses, offering love. This wasn't pessimism, but preparation, stripping fear from the unknown. When a real setback came, a sudden car repair bill, I didn't crumble. I budgeted, negotiated, and moved on the practice, having steadied my mind. I also drew on Marcus Aurelius' wisdom. Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me and my own way of thinking. His words reminded me that resilience lies in perspective. One rainy afternoon, I stood in a long line at the grocery store, my arms aching, frustration rising. My old self would have stewed, seeing it as proof of a cursed day. Instead, I shifted my view. This was a chance to practice patience, to notice the world. I watched a child giggle nearby, felt the weight of my bags as a reminder of abundance. The line moved, and so did I, unburdened by anger. Psychology reinforced this, showing how resilient minds reframe adversity. I learned to see challenges as temporary, not defining. When a friend cancelled plans, I didn't assume rejection. I saw their stress, sent a kind text, and planned a solo evening reading Seneca by candlelight. The flames flicker, a quiet companion. These small acts built a habit of endurance, teaching me that resilience isn't about avoiding pain, but navigating it with grace. There were days I struggled. After a week of sleepless nights, the fog returned heavy and familiar. I sat on my couch, the room dim, tempted to give in, but I remembered Pythagoras' concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. I acted, showered, walked outside, the air sharp in my lungs, and called a therapist for a check-in. Resilience didn't mean invincibility. It meant choosing to rise even when I felt weak. Each choice, however small, was a victory, a step toward a stronger self. For anyone facing their own storms, I share this embrace. One challenge today as a chance to grow. Maybe it's a delay, a criticism, a fear. Ask, what can I learn? Here. Try standing taller, breathing deeper, and taking one action, fix the problem. Seek help, or simply wait with calm. Notice how you feel after. Resilience builds in these moments, not in perfection, but in persistence. You're stronger than you know, and every test proves it. I still face setbacks. Life ensures that, but they no longer define me. Stoicism has given me a framework to meet them, to see each as a chance to hone my mind's strength. I walk through the world now with a quiet confidence, not because I'm unbroken, but because I've learned to mend, to stand firm, to keep going. Resilience is my armor, forged in the heat of hardship, and I carry it with me, ready for whatever comes next. I sit on my balcony, the evening air cool against my skin. The city's hum a distant pulse, and I feel the familiar flutter of anxiety, a tightness in my chest, a mind racing with what-ifs. For years, this was my constant companion, a shadow born of my own thoughts, convincing me the world was a trap waiting to spring. But Stoicism, with its quiet clarity, showed me that anxiety isn't a force outside me, it's a creation within one I can release. Marcus Aurelius' words became my anchor. Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, and my own way of thinking. This lesson took root as I deepened my Stoic practice 5 years into my journey from despair. I remember a night when anxiety gripped me, work deadlines loomed, a friend hadn't replied, my future felt like a fog. I paced my apartment, the floorboards creaking, my thoughts a storm. I'll fail, I'm alone, I can't cope. Then I stopped Epictetus' warning in mind. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. Now I set lit a candle, its small flame steady, and asked, what am I holding on to? The answer was clear fears I'd conjured, not facts. I began to practice letting go, treating anxiety as a guest I could politely show the door. Each morning I meditated, sitting cross-legged on a cushion, the room silent but for my breath. When worries arose about money, health, judgment, I named them, not fighting but observing. There's the thought of failure. I let it pass like a leaf on a stream, returning to my breath's rhythm. This wasn't suppression, but release, a choice to not fuel the fire. Over weeks, the thoughts lost their grip, their visits shorter, less frequent. Stoicism taught me to question anxiety's roots. One afternoon, stuck in a crowded subway, my heart raced, my mind screaming, I'm trapped. I closed my eyes, the train's sway a grounding pulse, and asked, What's true? I'm here, breathing safe. The crowd can't harm me unless I let it. I focused on the cool metal of the bowl in my hand, the murmur of voices, and the panic eased. Marcus's insight guided me. Anxiety wasn't the subway, it was my story about it. By rewriting that story, I found calm. I wove this into my daily life, blending Stoic wisdom with psychology's tools. I learned about the amygdala's role in fear, how it hijacks reason unless I intervene. When anxiety stirred, say, before a presentation, I paused, breathed deeply, and visualized success, not disaster. One evening, preparing for a talk, I stood in my living room, practicing my lines, and the mirror reflecting my nervous eyes. Instead of spiraling, I pictured Epictetus beside me saying, "You control your effort, not their applause." I spoke, stumbled, laughed, and kept going. The anxiety didn't vanish, but it no longer owned me. There were days I slipped. After a sleepless night, the fog returned, anxiety whispering, "You're falling apart." I sat on my bed, the sheets tangled, tempted to give in. But I recalled Pythagoras' concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. I acted, journaled my fears, walked outside the air sharp with autumn's bite, and called a friend. Small steps, but they broke the cycle. Letting go wasn't about perfection, it was about choosing reason over reflex again and again. For anyone caught in anxiety's grip, I offer this try, one moment of release, today. When worry spikes, pause, feel your feet on the ground, your breath in your chest. Name the fear, "I'm scared of failing," and ask, "Can I control this, if not let it drift?" If yes, take one small action, a note, a call, a step. Notice the shift, however slight. It's not a cure but a practice, and it builds a quieter mind. I still feel anxieties tug, life's uncertainties ensure that, but I no longer carry it like a chain. Stoicism gave me the power to see it as a thought, not a truth, and to let it go with a breath, a question, a choice. I walk lighter now. The world no longer a threat but a canvas for reason. This practice, this discarding of fear, has been my bridge from chaos to peace, and I carry it forward, ready to meet each day with a steadier heart. I wake to the soft hum of dawn, the world stirring outside my window, and I feel a quiet resolve to make this day count, not in grand gestures, but in choices that align with who I want to be. For too long, I drifted through life, my days shaped by depression's fog, each moment a reaction to pain or fear. Stoicism woke me to a different way, living with intention, crafting a life where every action reflects my values. This practice rooted in reason has become my compass, guiding me to a purpose that endures beyond the chaos of the world. 5 years into my Stoic journey, I began to see time as a canvas, not a burden. I'd spent years lost in despair, my days blurring into nights of self-doubt. But one morning, sitting at my desk, the air crisp with the scent of coffee, I opened my journal and wrote, "What matters to me?" The answers came slowly: kindness, growth, truth. I realized I'd been living by default, letting external demands dictate my path. Stoicism through Marcus Aurelius's clarity urged me to choose differently. You have power over your mind, not outside events. I decided to shape my days with purpose. Now, I started small, anchoring each morning in intention. Before checking my phone, I'd sit by the window, the glass cool against my palm, and set a focus. Today, I'll listen deeply. At work, when a colleague shared a struggle, I didn't rush to respond. I nodded, heard her, and offered a thoughtful word. The moment felt alive, not because it was grand, but because I'd chosen it. Epictetus's words echoed. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. Intention was my guard against that lapse, a way to stay true to my core. This practice reshaped my life's rhythm. I began aligning my actions with my values, even in the mundane moments. Shopping for groceries, I'd choose local produce, not just for health, but to support my community, a small act, but deliberate. At night, I reviewed my day, inspired by Seneca's reflections. Lying in bed, the room dark, but for a lamp's glow, I'd ask, did I live with purpose? When I'd snapped at a friend, I noted it, not to shame myself, but to plan better. Tomorrow, I'll pause before speaking. Each choice, however small, built a life I could stand behind. Stoicism taught me that intention isn't about control, but focus. I couldn't dictate outcomes, a project's success, a relationship's course, but I could control my effort. One evening, preparing for a community event, I felt the old anxiety. What if it fails? I sat on my couch, the fabric worn under my hands, and reframed it. My job is to prepare well and show up fully. I did organized, spoke, connected, and the event's warmth lingered not because it was flawless, but because I'd given it my all. Intention turned worry into work. Psychology deepened this practice, showing how values driven action fosters meaning. I learned to prioritize, to say no to what didn't align. When invited to a draining social event, I politely declined, choosing instead to read Seneca. The pages soft under my fingers, my mind alive with ideas. These choices weren't selfish. They were honest, a way to honor the life I was building. Pythagoras' wisdom guided me. Concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. Intention was that action, a way to channel energy into what mattered. There were days I veered off course. Distracted by work, I'd skip my morning reflection, my day slipping into chaos. By evening, I'd feel hollow, unmoored. But I'd sit the city's lights twinkling outside and reset. Tomorrow, I begin again. Intention didn't demand perfection, only persistence. Each return to my values, each deliberate act strengthened my resolve like a river carving stone. For anyone seeking purpose, I offer this: choose one value today. Maybe courage, maybe kindness, and let it guide one action. Pause before a conversation. Ask, how can I show up fully? Or pick a task and do it with care, noticing its weight. Feel the difference. Intention isn't loud, it's quiet, steady, transformative. Start now and let each choice build a life that's yours. I still navigate a noisy world, but intention is my North Star. Stoicism gave me the tools to live, not by accident, but by design, to make each day a reflection of my deepest truths. I carry this practice forward, knowing that a life of purpose isn't found, it's made one intentional step at a time. I walk through the park, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my boots, their fleeting reds and golds. A quiet reminder that nothing lasts forever. For years I fought this truth, clinging to moments, people, and dreams as if I could freeze them in time. Depression fed on that resistance, turning every change, a lost job, a fading friendship, my own aging, into proof of a cruel world. But Stoicism, with its gentle wisdom, taught me to embrace impermanence, to find peace in life's ebb and flow, to see change not as loss, but as the pulse of existence. 5 years into my journey, I began to see clinging as the root of much of my pain. I'd lie awake, the clock's tick, a metronome of dread, mourning what was gone, or fearing what might vanish. One evening, sorting through old photos, I found a picture of a friend who'd drifted away. My chest ached, the fog stirring. I failed, I lost them. But Marcus Aurelius' words steadied me. You have power over your mind, not outside events. I couldn't hold the past, but I could choose how to meet the present. I set the photo down, grateful for what was, and let it be. Stoicism's practice of amor fati, love of fate, became my guide. I started each morning by the window, the air sharp with dawn reflecting on change. I'd think of the leaves falling, the seasons turning, and remind myself this is nature's way. and I am part of it. When a project I'd poured months into was scrapped at work, I felt the sting but didn't spiral. Sitting at my desk, the hum of the office around me, I thought, this too is fleeting. I did my best. I pivoted, offered new ideas, and moved on the way with lighter because I didn't fight what I couldn't control. This acceptance deepened through Stoic exercises. I practiced memento mori, contemplating my own mortality, not to mourn, but to awaken. One night, lying in bed, the room soft with moonlight, I imagined my final day. What would matter? Not my bank account or accolades, but the love I'd given, the truth I'd sought. This wasn't grim, it was clarifying. The next day, I called my parents, listened longer, laughed more the phone warm in my hand. Knowing life is temporary made each moment vivid a gift I could choose to unwrap. Epictetus' warning kept me grounded. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. Clinging to what's passing is that lapse. When my favorite coffee shop closed, I walked by its shuttered windows. The sign faded and felt a pang. My old self would have grieved it as a personal slight. Instead, I smiled, remembering mornings spent there, and found a new spot, its wooden tables, worn but welcoming. Change wasn't my enemy. My resistance was. Letting go opened doors. Psychology echoed this, showing how acceptance reduces suffering. I learned about mindfulness, staying present without grasping. One afternoon, caught in a sudden rain, I didn't curse the downpour. I stood under an awning, the drops drumming, and watched the world blur. I was wet, alive here. The moment wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I didn't need to fight it. These small surrenders built a peace that carried me through bigger shifts, health scares, career pivots, the slow drift of time. There were moments I struggled. When a close colleague moved away, I sat on my couch, the room too quiet, tempted to cling to our old routines. The fog whispered, "You're alone now." But I recalled Pythagoras' concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. I wrote them a letter not to hold them back, but to honor what we'd shared. I sent it, the envelope crisp in my hands, and felt lighter. Acceptance wasn't passive, it was an active choice to embrace what is. For anyone wrestling with change, I offer this notice: one shift today, a season's turn, a plan's disruption and pause. Feel it, don't fight it. Ask, what can I learn here? Maybe it's gratitude for what was, or openness to what's next. Try writing one sentence. This is changing and I accept it. Feel the release. Acceptance isn't defeat, it's freedom, a way to live fully in a world that moves. I still feel the tug of attachment, but I no longer let it rule. Stoicism gave me the strength to see impermanence as life's rhythm, not its flaw. I walk through days now with open hands, ready to hold what comes and release what goes. This acceptance is my peace, a quiet power that lets me live not in fear of change, but in harmony with it. I stand at my window, the evening sky streaked with amber, the city below alive with countless stories, and I feel a quiet urge to reach out, not just to live my truth, but to share it. For years, I walked alone in depression's fog, believing my pain was mine to bear in silence. But Stoicism, with its call to reason and connection, showed me that my journey, my struggle and transformation could be a light for others. By speaking my story, I've learned that healing isn't just personal. It's a bridge, a way to guide those still lost in their own shadows. 5 years ago, as I emerged from despair, I began to see my experience as more than survival. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe, the clink of cups around me, I overheard a stranger's quiet confession to a friend, "I don't know how to keep going." Her voice echoed my past, the nights I'd whispered similar words to the dark. Marcus Aurelius's wisdom stirred in me. You have power over your mind, not outside events. I'd found that power, and I felt a pull to share it, not to preach, but to offer a map to someone stumbling as I once did. I started small, sharing my story in conversations. At a friend's dinner, the table warm with candlelight. Someone asked about my calm amid a stressful week. I opened up about the blade I'd once held, the fog that had cloaked me, and the Stoic principles that pulled me through. The room grew quiet, not with pity, but with recognition. A guest later confided their own struggles, and I listened, offering Epictetus's insight: very little is needed for everything. To be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. I suggested they try questioning one painful thought. Days later, they thanked me, saying it helped. My story had become a spark. This act of sharing grew into a practice. I joined a community group not as a teacher, but as a voice among many. Standing in a small room, the air thick with shared vulnerability, I spoke of my routine meditation, journaling, intentional acts, and how they had anchored me. I shared Pythagoras' call: concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. A young man approached after eyes downcast and said he'd been suicidal too. I didn't offer solutions, just my story and a question. What's one small step you could take today? He nodded, and I saw a flicker of hope. I wasn't saving him. I was showing him he wasn't alone. Stoicism told me that sharing is an act of reason, not ego. I didn't need to be perfect, only honest. One evening, writing in my journal, the pen's scratch a steady rhythm. I reflected on why I spoke out. It wasn't for praise, but for connection, a way to honor the philosophy that saved me. Psychology reinforced this: storytelling builds empathy, reduces isolation. When I shared my darkest moments, like the nights I'd planned to end it all, I saw nods, tears, hands reaching out. My vulnerability, tempered by stoic clarity, became a mirror for others to see their own strength. There were moments I hesitated. After talk, someone dismissed my story, saying, "Not everyone can just think their way out." The sting hit the fog, whispering, "You're a fraud." But I sat with it, the city's hum outside my window, and recalled Marcus. Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it. I couldn't control their view, only my truth. I kept sharing, not for approval, but for the one person who might hear and take a step. That was enough. For anyone feeling trapped in their pain, I offer this: share one piece of your journey today, however small. Tell a friend, write a note, speak to a group. Say what hurt, what helped. Maybe it's I felt lost, but I took a walk and found calm. Notice how it feels to be heard, to connect. You don't need to have all the answers. Your story is enough. It's not about fixing others, but showing them they're not alone in the dark. I still carry my past, but sharing it has made it lighter. Stoicism gave me the courage to speak, to turn my pain into purpose, to light a path for others. I walk forward now, not as a savior, but as a companion, offering my story as a reminder. We heal together, one honest word at a time, building a world where no one faces the fog alone. I sit at my desk, the morning light soft through the window, a cup of tea warming my hands, and I reflect on the journey that brought me here, a path from despair's shadow to a life shaped by reason. 5 years ago, Stoicism became my guide, not a cure, but a practice, a way to train my mind against the fog that once consumed me. I've learned that this work is never finished. It's an ongoing quest, a daily choice to live with clarity, courage, and purpose. This commitment, rooted in Stoic wisdom, is my strength, a reminder that growth is a lifelong craft, not a destination. I used to think healing meant an end a day, when depression would vanish, leaving me whole. But life, like the seasons outside my window, is never static. There are mornings when the fog creeps back, subtle but familiar, whispering doubts about my worth or future. One such day, after a sleepless night, I sat on my couch, the room grey with dawn, feeling the old weight. Marcus Aurelius's words steadied me. You have power over your mind, not outside events. I didn't need to be perfect. I needed to act. I meditated, journaled, walked. The routine I'd built held me firm, not erasing the fog, but guiding me through it. Stoicism taught me that the quest is in the practice, not the outcome. Each day I recommit to its principles, question my judgments, act with intention, accept what I cannot change. I keep a notebook, its pages worn, where I write daily reflections. One evening, after a tense work meeting, I noted I felt dismissed, but I can't control their views. I can listen, learn, respond with calm. This habit, inspired by Seneca's nightly reviews, keeps me honest. Epictetus's warning remains my guard. Very little is needed for everything to be upset or ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. A single unchecked thought can spiral, but a single choice can redirect. I've woven this quest into life's fabric. Walking to the market, the air sharp with winter's edge, I practice mindfulness, noting the crunch of frost, the warmth of my scarf. When a stranger snaps at me, I pause, breathe, and choose kindness, not because I feel it, but because it aligns with my values. These moments aren't triumphs. They're steps, each one a renewal of my commitment. Pythagoras' call echoes, concern should drive us into action and not into a depression. I act small, deliberate acts that keep the quest alive, from writing a kind note to tackling a daunting task. Psychology has deepened this work, showing how habits compound over time. I've learned that consistency, not intensity, builds resilience. Some days my meditation is a mere 5 minutes, my journal. A single line, but I show up. When I falter, skipping a practice, snapping in frustration, I don't dwell. I sit the city's hum, a backdrop, and ask, what's next? One morning, after oversleeping and missing my routine, I felt the fog stuck, but I opened my book, read Seneca's line about time's value, and started anew. The quest thrives in these returns, not in flawless streaks. This journey isn't solitary. Sharing my story, as I've done with friends and strangers, has shown me that growth ripples outward. At a community talk, a woman shared her own struggle, inspired by my words. I didn't solve her pain. I offered a tool, a question, a practice, and saw her eyes brighten. Stoicism's gift is this: it's not just for me, but for us, a way to live well together. My quest strengthens when I help others begin theirs, a cycle of reason and connection. For anyone seeking a steadier path, I offer this: choose one practice today, perhaps a morning pause to name what you value, or an evening note on what you learned. Do it however briefly and notice the clarity it brings. If you stray, return without shame. The quest isn't about perfection, but persistence, about choosing reason daily. Start now with one small act and let it grow into a life you shape. I still walk with the fog at times, but it no longer leads. Stoicism has given me a compass, reason, action, acceptance to navigate life's turns. This quest, this lifelong practice, is my freedom, a way to meet each day not as a victim, but as a craftsman of my mind. I carry it forward, knowing that every step, every choice is a chance to live with purpose, to build a life that endures. Stoicism lifted me from depression's fog, forging resilience through daily practice. By mastering my thoughts, I found purpose in life's chaos, crafting a meaningful existence. This lifelong quest shapes me step by intentional step. Subscribe to our channel for more transformative wisdom like this video, and share it to inspire others to navigate their storms with clarity and strength.